Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this morning here at the Italian Pavilion dedicated to the National Biodiversity Research Center. Let me start by thanking Fondazione Emblema, who has magnificently coordinated the INARC project and has given us the opportunity to be here these 3 days in Osaka to present our scientific initiatives. And also I would like to extend our thanks to the Italian Pavilion that is hosting us during these days. We will start by giving you a brief introduction of what the National Biodiversity Future Center is and why Italy felt the urge of dedicating such an amount of money to the study of Italian biodiversity. I am speaking on behalf of the President of the National Biodiversity Future Center, of its scientific director and its general director. And I'm also speaking at the beginning of this morning on behalf of my colleagues, Maria Chiara Chiantore from the University of Genova, Fabio De Pascale from the University of Padova, Lara Maestrello from the University of Modena Reggio Emilia, and Patrizia Stipcic from the University of Napoli. Why should we care about biodiversity? We should care about biodiversity because in the last decades we have observed a too rapid decline in biodiversity, what the scientists usually call biodiversity erosion. If we see that curve going down, the black one, we understand that if we don't do nothing, we will continue to lose many species of plant, animals, and microorganisms, which are useful for us. If we increase conservation, we can try to put that line in a straight position in the green part, and we can start restoring habitats and ecosystems which have been destroyed over those years. But then we need a cultural change, a transformation in the systems of production and consumption. And this will be the key factor to invert decisively this curve and go back to our original situation. The major drivers of biodiversity erosions are the excessive use of land and sea, the overexploitation of natural resources, climate change, which is a factor and is becoming a crucial factor certainly to address, pollution, the best example of which is plastic in the sea, and alien species, the circulation of species which are not part of that ecosystem, which have not been part of that ecosystem before. And most of these drivers are of anthropic origin. They depend on us and on our behavior. Now, a few years ago, after the pandemic, the Ministry of University and Research decided to dedicate a huge amount of money to the study of Italian biodiversity. And so the National Biodiversity Future Center was erected with a budget of 320 million euros in 3 years. And this is one of the 5 national centers which are included in the PNRR. The hub location is in Palermo, and the proponent was the National Research Council. The National Biodiversity Future Center hosts 26 universities, 7 public research institutes, and 5 private companies or institutes or foundations, whatever. And through our cascading grants, we are also collecting many more institutes, public and private, who are interested in the study of Italian biodiversity. As I mentioned, this is a huge amount of money dedicated to the study of biodiversity, something that none of the scientists of my generation has ever experienced before. So the first thing that we asked ourselves is why this change of strategy actually happened. And the answer, the first answer is in this important step forward that our parliament, the Parliament of the Italian Republic, did 3 years ago, on February the 8th in 2022, when Article 9 of the Constitution was modified with the addition of the words environment, biodiversity, and ecosystem. To make a long story short, the protection of the environment, of our ecosystems, was placed at the same level as the protection of our cultural heritage. Scientists have always had a very good idea of why biodiversity should be protected. Because biodiversity, in addition to be beautiful to observe, is also useful for mankind. It provides a lot of ecosystem services which are part of our own life, which are part and fundamental for our own existence. Politics started to realize that protecting biodiversity is important. Politics did this step forward now 10 years ago when the United Nations approved the Agenda 2030. It was voted and signed by all the countries participating to the United Nations, and linked with Agenda 2030, there are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Then Europe decided to dedicate an orientation of its strategic plan to ecosystem and Europe's ecosystem and biodiversity. And finally, more recently, Europe adopted a law, a regulation called the Nature Restoration Law, which forces the member states to adopt measures to restore damaged or destroyed ecosystems. Then economics. Even the World Economic Forum recognized the importance of biodiversity, of course, in terms of money, in terms of wealth, by recognizing that more than half of the world GDP is actually directly or moderately dependent on nature. So preserving biodiversity is important for our own wealth. Then even ethics, and the best example of this change in the understanding of the importance of biodiversity that I have found is in a book written by Pope Francis, where the Pope himself recognized that the destruction of the human environment is something very serious, and that overexploitation of the environment is not a correct interpretation of the Bible. And to put something on top of it, even design, glamour, understood the importance of biodiversity when Pantone, that you know is a company which is related with numbering and all the different colors in the world, established a few years ago the color of biodiversity, which is this kind of pink color that you see in my slide. So the reason why all these groups of people recognize the importance of biodiversity, and they did it in Italy especially, is probably because Italy is an hotspot of biodiversity. Who should care about biodiversity if not us, who hold the great majority of biodiversity in Europe, 60,000 animal species, 10,000 vascular plants, 130 different ecosystems. Some of these ecosystems, some of these plants, some of these animals are at risk of extinction. So we have to move on. We have to activate ourselves. We have to do something. And we try to do something with the National Biodiversity Future Center, which has two overarching goals that you see written in these slides, and is organized with 6 different thematic spokes, 2 of them dealing with marine ecosystems, 2 of them dealing with terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems, and 2 of them, 5 and 6, dealing with urban ecosystems. But then we have 2 spokes, 2 parts of our organization, which are spokes 7 and 8, which are there to create an impact on society. These are the titles of the different spokes, but it's something on which we can move on. This is the number of people which are involved in the National Biodiversity Future Center. We have a staff of 1,500 people and more than 700 more people which have been hired, especially on calls issued by the National Biodiversity Future Center. The scientific impact of NBFC is very relevant. Already 1,000 scientific publications have been published by the scientists working in and for the National Biodiversity Future Center, and we have many other actions which are being deployed through the National Biodiversity Future Center, including the organization of the National Forum on Biodiversity, which will be held in Milan at the end of the next month of May. There are actions supporting research in protected areas. This is a list of all the protected areas in Italy which are to which funds from the National Biodiversity Future Center have been given. And these are projects dedicated to SME, those projects which we dedicate to getting SMEs involved in the study of biodiversity. At the end of this introduction, in a few words, biodiversity is important for our own health in observance of the concept of One Health. We are working with a specific model which is based on 4 different pillars: monitoring, conservation, restoration, and valorization. You will see the second part of this morning dedicated in blocks to these 4 different pillars. The first 3 of them, of course, are dedicated to the collection of data, to the improvement and increasing of our knowledge of Italian biodiversity, which is fundamental to do any other further action. And the 4th pillar, of course, is dedicated to create an impact on society. There is a part which is dedicated to education, to the education of a new generation of scientists. If there is something which is almost equally bad about erosion, biodiversity erosion, is the erosion of the biodiversity experts. And we have experienced an erosion in the number of scientists, researchers, taxonomists who know how to study biodiversity. So we organized seasonal courses, master courses, and a national PhD program hosted by the University of Palermo, which at the time hosts about 250 PhD students. Finally, we want to create an impact on the population, also through specific projects which are dedicated to the citizens. We believe that this is not only important, but even fundamental. We want to, if we want our policy makers to think about protecting biodiversity, first of all, we have to convince the citizens. Citizen science projects are projects in which citizens, groups of citizens from small associations, from schools, from districts, from local communities, can be involved in the study and the monitoring of specific ecosystems, of a specific species, as we will see in some of the examples that will be shown afterwards. And finally, our main goal is to protect the cultural value of biodiversity. And we want to do it with that group of young researchers that are involved in the study of biodiversity in the National Biodiversity Future Center. Thank you very much. This was my last slide. Okay, and now we move on. We have organized this morning in 4 different blocks, and we will have a break in the middle with a specific presentation on a specific research project. So the first block of videos, the choice we made was to get all the researchers who could not come to Osaka for this presentation to shoot a brief clip, a brief video in which their own research is presented. The first block of clips, of video clips, is dedicated to monitoring. As we said before, Italy is one of the hotspots of biodiversity in the world. But as we saw, biodiversity is eroding all over the planet due to several drivers, most of them of anthropogenic origin. We considered ourselves as jealous guardians of this invaluable heritage. And we feel obliged to do all we can to protect what nature has given to us. In order to do so, the first step is to improve our knowledge of Italian biodiversity. And a better knowledge is achieved only supporting biodiversity scientists, forming a new generation of biodiversity experts, which are the goals of the National Biodiversity Future Center. Knowing biodiversity implies the knowledge of species, of habitats, of ecosystems. And this goal is reached by combining taxonomic expertise, the scientist who knows one specific group of animals or plants, with modern molecular tool, something that we researchers like to call integrative taxonomy. And in the first clip, we will discover how scientists approach the monitoring of insect species, the most abundant group of animals on Earth, combining classical taxonomy and molecular tools. The first clip, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Alessandra Ricceri and I am a researcher from Roma Tre University. I am a zoologist and I am involved in the activities of the spoke tree of the National Biodiversity Future Center. We all know that species conservation is fundamental to maintain healthy and balanced ecosystems, which is of course also relevant for human health and also our economy. Personally, I believe that species conservation means to protect the evolutionary processes that led to the current biodiversity and to protect also the evolutionary potential that will lead to the species of the future. Since Italy is one of the European countries with the highest species richness, including many endemic species, the focus of my research is to study Italian species of insects, which of course represent most of the biodiversity, and focusing in particular on the endemic ones. And my research is based on the use of molecular techniques. First of all, to protect something, you must know it, and molecular data are extremely useful for species identification and to detect new taxonomic entities. In our surveys, for example, by combining DNA barcoding and phylogenetic analysis, we described a new Italian endemic species of blister beetles, and we reported the presence in Italy of the earwig Forficula mediterranea, which is cryptic with Forficula auricularia, only known from Spain and Morocco. Exploring the evolutionary history of a species is important also to detect evolutionary lineages that might require specific conservation strategies. Using a genomic approach with DDRAD sequencing data, we are studying two genera of grasshoppers, Italopodisma and Italohippus, which are endemic of the Central Apennines. Our results show that the evolution of both hides a complex history of isolation and admixture among populations, and that the systematics and the taxonomy of this genera should be completely revised. Considering that both genera are included in the IUCN Red Lists, our studies will be particularly relevant to define more concrete conservation strategies towards the populations which require more specific attention. Molecular data are indeed extremely important also for population genetics and phylogeographic studies, as they can give us information about the genetic variability and the evolutionary potential of a species or a population. For example, in one of our studies involving the endemic blister beetle Milabris obsoleta, after the analysis of 4 markers, we found a surprisingly low genetic variability. These results should be surely more deeply investigated with a genomic approach, but might indicate a low potential of the species to overcome rapid environmental changes in the future, like those caused by human activities.
As we learned from this clip by Alessandra Ricceri from the Third University in Rome, taxonomic studies are no longer based simply on morphological observation and the comparison of anatomical traits. The advent of DNA sequences and the possibility of sequencing entire genomes has opened a new frontier of research, placing a powerful tool in the hands of researchers. We have heard about insects, but together with insects, vertebrates represent indeed another paradigmatic group of animals, many of them being quite popular among the population. One of the reasons for them to be so popular is the fact that some species have expanded their wild habitat range, and are slowly invading also our urban habitats. Their monitoring requires patient observations, but also technological approaches such as phototrapping, as we will learn by the second clip.
My name is Leonardo Ancillotto, and I am a researcher at the National Research Council of Italy. And I'm part of the National Biodiversity Future Center, and especially I work on urban biodiversity. My specialization is on urban mammals, actually, and what we've been doing in the last years for the National Biodiversity Future Center is the monitoring of urban wildlife in the major cities of Italy. We applied an integrated approach, applying different methodologies for assessing urban biodiversity of mammals in cities, especially applying a bioacoustic approach and camera trapping. Our main goal is to identify the key traits of urban landscape that foster the occurrence of biodiversity, and especially of mammals, in our cities, for both the conservation of conservation-relevant species and for fostering the provision of ecosystem services by wildlife in our green spaces to enhance both environmental and human health. Our campaign of camera trapping from the city of Florence was actually very successful, as we detected the occurrence of more than 20 species of mammals inside the urban space of Florence, which is quite surprising given the high density of people. Among the species that we recorded, we have the crested porcupines, as well as very common species like the brown hare, but also some conservation-relevant species like the grey wolf, for example. what we found particularly interesting in terms of management of green areas is that the diversity and especially richness of urban mammals in the city of Florence is fostered especially by the occurrence of extensive grassy hedges and natural vegetation remnants that are key resources for wild species to occur inside cities. Conversely, the presence of nocturnal lights at night, that is light pollution in cities, was a negative driver of mammal diversity, suggesting that for fostering biodiversity in our cities, at least for mammals and especially for conservation relevant mammals, we need more wild spaces inside our green areas in urban areas, and we have to limit artificial lights at nights, as these affect the presence of especially rare and protected species inside our cities. Our next steps include the modeling of how we can foster the occurrence and the connectivity of currently present urban green spaces by managing the spaces, the parks we already have, and possibly planning the implementation of new green spaces to create a more ecologically functional network of green spaces.
Leonardo from the National Research Council showed us how monitoring can be improved using sophisticated technological tools. Now, a true monitoring activity should not be limited to abundant or well-known organisms, iconic organisms. Scientists of the National Biodiversity Feature Center also deal with poorly known animals, such as those tiny microscopic invertebrates which live in small ponds of fresh water. The third clip, please.
My name is Diego Fontaneto, and I work at the National Research Council of Italy, in Verbania, in Piedmont. Basically, I'm a zoologist, and my project for the National Biodiversity Future Center is on quantitative aspects in ecology of microscopic animals living in soils, water, and in other habitats. The main project is to describe this diversity of poorly studied microscopic animals that live everywhere, but we have little evidence of what they do and what they can do for the environment. So I work on them mostly in water and soils, but also in quite unusual habitats, for example, glaciers or other places where we don't think that there's a lot of animal life. Because of this, for me, monitoring and valorizing biodiversity, it means understanding what lives in the different habitats, and I focus on organisms that are poorly known. And to do that, we need to apply different tools and techniques from morphology, ecology, DNA, physiology, with the aim to understand ecosystem functioning. And that's why I think that monitoring and valorizing biodiversity in every habitat needs to include microscopic organisms that otherwise we don't see, but maybe they are really the key to make the ecosystem working.
Diego from the National Research Council spoke to us about tiny and neglected organisms. But in addition to freshwater, other elusive environments and ecosystems are those evolved in places which are difficult to reach for us, such as the deep sea. Nonetheless, studying the biodiversity of these environments is still possible, and it is indeed very fascinating with the aid again of different but equally sophisticated technologies. Marine scientists of the National Biodiversity Future Center study the diversity of underwater habitats, and they come to encounter fantastic animals, as we will see in the fourth clip.
Hello everyone, I'm Fabio Campanella. I'm a marine scientist working at the CNR IUBIM of Ancona. And today I'd like to introduce you to a part of the oceans that's still largely unknown, but incredibly important for the health of marine ecosystems, the deep sea, and in particular seamounts. Seamounts are underwater mountains that rise from the ocean floor but don't reach the surface, and many of them are considered as underwater oases. In fact, these structures interact with ocean currents, creating conditions that concentrate nutrients and attract a wide range of marine life, from microscopic plankton to large predators like tunas, sharks, marine mammals, and seabirds. In the Mediterranean Sea, and especially in the Tyrrhenian Basin, there are over 250 of these features, but despite their ecological significance, they are still poorly understood and underprotected. Globally, only a very small percentage of seamounts fall within marine protected areas, and most have never been scientifically explored. So to address this gap, the PELASIM survey was launched as an initiative of the National Biodiversity Future Center, and the goal of the PELASIM survey was to investigate the pelagic ecosystems associated with two key seamounts in the Tyrrhenian Sea. We aim to explore how the physical and biological characteristics of these underwater mountains influence ocean productivity, biodiversity, and the distribution of the marine species. To do this, we combine traditional sampling methods with innovative tools like environmental DNA, underwater camera, and acoustic sonars. We focus not only on small organisms like plankton, but also on fish, top predators, and overall patterns of biodiversity. As human activities expand further into the open ocean, understanding and protecting deep sea ecosystems becomes increasingly urgent. Seamounts are vulnerable to threats like overfishing, deep sea mining, and the impacts of climate change. So scientific research like PELASIM helps to build the foundation needed to design effective strategies for their long-term conservation. Protecting seamounts means safeguarding the biological richness and biodiversity of our oceans, but also means recognizing that conservation efforts must extend beyond coastlines into the open oceans, where these hidden structures play a vital role in ocean health.
Fabio from the National Research Council showed us that there is a great deal of our own planet which is still poorly known. And sometimes we think that we spend a lot of money to look for life in other planets, and we forget that we have a significant part of our own planet which still needs to be better understood. And needless to say, for a country that expands its borders and extends itself in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea with thousands of kilometers of coasts, the marine environment represents a very interesting field, a crucial field. With such overpopulated and high population density countries surrounding our own sea, the Mediterranean Sea, a crucial research topic, a crucial aspect to tackle is marine pollution. Pollution is well known as one of the drivers of biodiversity erosion, but at the same time, it also influences human health. Therefore, monitoring sea pollutants is key for preventing diseases and planning decontamination actions and measures for preventing inorganic and organic pollution. We will see something about that in the fifth clip.
In questo momento stiamo percorrendo la costa dell'Adriatico da sud a nord, andando a mappare a livello biogeografico il lato bioma delle acque costiere, vale a dire andare a caratterizzare la comunità microbica cercando specificamente dei patogeni coliformi, in particolare delle Escherichia coli, per evidenziare eventuali inquinamenti batterici che possano essere nocivi per la salute umana. Sì, mi chiamo Francesco, sono attualmente un postdoc presso il gruppo di ecologia molecolare del CNR IRSA di Verbania Parlanza.
Io sono Zaccaria, sono un borsista presso al gruppo molecolare dell'Istituto IRSA di Verbania. Questo progetto è parte del piano PNRR, è una collaborazione tra l'Istituto IRSA di Verbania, l'IRVIN di Ancona e l'OGS di Trieste. Tantissima gente dipende diretta e indirettamente da queste acque, ma anche in un contesto di cambiamento climatico diciamo che tutte le variazioni che ancora già si possono vedere hanno un impatto diretto sulla comunità microbiana, che poi questo affetta anche in altre aree o caratteristiche dell'acqua e delle diverse risorse che l'essere umano utilizza.
Abbiamo scelto l'Escherichia coli perché è il potenziale patogeno più conosciuto verosimilmente, nonché uno dei più facili da coltivare, uno caratterizzato da un tasso di crescita in tempi piuttosto brevi ed è anche molto conosciuto a livello di comunità scientifica, quindi è possibile poi andare a confrontare i dati che otteniamo con i dati presenti in letteratura.
Sea pollution is a key factor, is a very important factor, as Francesco and Zacharias from the National Research Center has shown us. And monitoring can be performed with tools that allow samplings in situations in which traditional methods would be insufficient, such as in this example with marine mammals. The sixth clip, please.
Hello everybody, my name is Alberto Secchi and I'm currently holding a young science position at CIMA Research Foundation in Italy. In the framework of the Spoke 2 of the National Biodiversity Future Center, I'm involved in a research aimed to get microbiological information from marine mammal brief. Marine mammals are key indicator of ocean health, reflecting change in ecosystem dynamics. As top predators, they integrate signal from various trophic levels, including shift in prey abundance and pollution severity. Analyzing the microbiome present in marine mammal blood offer non-invasive information into their exposure to environmental stressors. The microbial community in the blood can reveal pathogens and physiological changes linked to those stressors. So what we basically do, using swabs carried by drone, we sample the blood of free-ranging whales inhabiting different Italian seas. These are the different drones that we use. We often operate more than one drone at the same time. As you can see, this drone has got a camera that are used to collect images for photogrammetry of the animal, allowing us to estimate their body condition, specifically if there are visible signs of nutritional stress. So usually when a drone collects the blood sample, there is another drone collecting natural images of the whale. This sperm whale has just returned from a deep dive, which lasted about 45 minutes. During it, was hunting mesopelagic cephalopods at a depth of around 800 to 1000 meters. Between one dive and the next, it stays at the surface for about 5 minutes, giving us a window of time to spot it and approach it with the drone for sampling. And then, as you can see, the rest is up to it. Once the drone with the swabs is retrieved, the swabs are stored in liquid nitrogen and then transported to the Dipartimento di Scienze della Terra, della Vita e dell'Ambiente at the University of Genova, where the microbiome DNA is extracted and processed. The analysis is ongoing. We'll keep you posted.
Alberto from CIMA Foundation and the University of Genova gave us a hint of how different methods can be used to sample pollution in the sea. But pollution is not the sole potential driver for biodiversity erosion. More recently, another potential powerful driver has come into action: climate change, as you know. Climate change, especially when rapidly influence the world distribution of species and population, and may cause a severe damage to biodiversity. When invasive species extend their new habitats and, for example, autochthonous populations fail to adapt themselves to the new competition. In the next clip, NBFC scientists study the dynamics of population of mammals when climate conditions change rapidly. Please, the seventh.
I am Francesco Ferretti, and together with my research group in the University of Siena, we are contributing to the National Biodiversity Future Center by working on the responses of mammals to environmental variation. We are particularly interested in the response to increasing temperatures for mammals living in communities threatened by ongoing global changes. Behavior is an immediate indicator of responses to external stressors, and increasing temperatures could alter it by triggering spatial or temporal responses in animals that could increase their activity at higher elevation sites on mountains, for example, or during the night instead of the day. And we will see how these responses could trigger some potential costs for animals. We are focusing on wild ungulates living in contrasting ecosystems ranging from the sea level to alpine areas, and we are integrating data on mammal activity, predator diet, temperature and other environmental variables, as well as population densities. A major result concerns the responses of a delicate herbivore, the roe deer, to summer temperatures, which we have studied in 8 protected areas in central Italy. In this figure, you can see the total diel activity level of the roe deer in relation to mean daily temperature. And you see that with increasing temperature, roe deer decrease their total activity. In this other figure, you can see the probability of nocturnal versus diurnal activity in relation to temperature. And you see that with higher temperature, roe deer become more nocturnal. While these behavioral responses are expected to improve thermoregulation, they may also trigger potential costs for roe deer in terms of reduced food intake through decreased overall activity, or increased risk of encounters with nocturnal predators such as the wolf. In an alpine area, we are concentrating on the responses of mountain ungulates to temperatures and predators. And in particular, we are focusing on the alpine chamois. In the Soana Valley, in Gran Paradiso National Park, we documented that after the wolf recolonized this area, chamois increased their use of sites at higher altitudes. These sites present abundant rocks and scree and are less accessible by predators, although vegetation is more scattered, which can trigger potential nutritional costs for chamois. But what about the responses to temperature? Like the roe deer, also the chamois showed a reduction of total diel activity with increase in temperature, and also an increase of nocturnal instead of diurnal activity with increase in temperature. Like for the roe deer, these responses could trigger costs in terms of food intake and vulnerability to nocturnal predators, and overall, both the responses to temperatures and to predation risk would determine costs for chamois that could amplify each other. Now we want to integrate data on responses to multiple stressors: temperature, predators, humans, And given the role of ungulates in ecosystems, assessing their responses to all these drivers is important to understanding processes potentially triggering broad ecological consequences.
While Francesco Ferretti from the University of Siena showed us a direct effect of global change, on climate change, on this group of animals, we know that climate change indirectly generates another influence on the mobility of different species in the world. Alien species are another cause for biodiversity erosion. The arrival of invasive species poses a severe threat to local biodiversity, as the species, the autochthonous species, often fail to counteract the arrival of these species, and they end up being competitively excluded. Many are the examples of invasive plants and animals that are reshaping Italian fauna and flora in marine and terrestrial habitats. In some particularly interesting cases, invasive species pose a threat not only to autochthonous species, but also to human economic activities such as agriculture and floriculture. It is the case of the so-called Japanese beetles, as we will learn from the 8th clip. Please.
Monitoring invasive species is crucial because they can severally impact ecosystem, agricultures, and economies. When non-native species establish themselves in new environments, they often lack natural predators, allowing them to spread rapidly and outcompete native species. This is exactly the case with Popillia japonica, commonly known as Japanese beetle. Over the past few years, I've been studying this beetle, which is native to Japan, but has become a major pest in Europe and North America. Interestingly, Popillia japonica is not considered a pest in Japan because it exists within a balanced ecosystem where natural predators such as parasitic wasps and fungi help regulate its population. However, when introduced to new regions without these natural controls, it can spread aggressively. Moreover, its ability to fly long distances and feed on over 400 plant species makes it particularly problematic in areas where it has no natural enemies. As molecular evolutionary biologists and bioinformaticians, my team and I have focused on understanding how this beetle has invaded new territories. To do so, we sequence and assemble its entire genome, followed by structural and functional annotation. Using this genomic information as a foundation and employing newly generated sequencing data from Japan, the United States, the Azores, and Italy, we conducted population genomics analysis to trace the beetle's invasion route, explore possible demographic scenarios, and investigate whether natural selection is influencing its spread. Our findings reveal that Popillia japonica first spread from central Japan to the United States, and from there it was introduced into Europe through two independent events, one to the Azores and another to Italy. The genomic data set we generated is not only valuable for evolutionary studies, but also provides a powerful tool for monitoring future outbreaks. Indeed, recently, with new infestations reported in Switzerland, both in Zurich and central Switzerland, we sequenced individuals from these two areas and applied our genomic data to determine their origins. Our analysis showed that the beetles in central Switzerland were likely introduced from the Italian populations, while those in Zurich appear to have arrived independently from North America. This work highlights the critical role of genomics and bioinformatics in tracking invasive species. By combining these two tools, we can improve monitoring efforts and better understand pests like Popillia japonica spread, ultimately helping to develop more effective control strategies. Thank you.
Defending ourselves against invasive species, of course, inevitably leads us into the field of conservation, as we will hear later on, which is, of course, another pillar of the National Biodiversity Future Center. and conservation strategies of courts and invasive species of courts are not only an issue at the terrestrial level, but also at the marine level. The 9th clip, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Simonetta Fraschetti of the University of Naples Federico II, and I'm presently co-chairing Spoke 1, which is strongly dedicated to improve the conservation of marine biodiversity in Italy. Italy is an hotspot of biodiversity, but presently only the 15.5% is under protection regime. It is clearly not enough if you consider that we have already lost the 80% of macroalgal forest and of oyster reef. These are impressive numbers and we need solutions. One solution is for sure to expand the present conservation setting, which is also a commitment considering the request by the European Union and international laws and directive to reach the 30% of protection of our country, both the terrestrial and the marine environment, with about the 10% of full protection. These are very challenging targets, and the National Biodiversity Future Center is working to support this process by exploring, mapping, and monitoring. We are exploring more than hundreds of sites presently unknown, which is really an incredible effort considering that for a long time no funding and no biodiversity studies were considered a priority in our country. We are mapping biodiversity, we are mapping habitat and species, we are trying to assess their status and also to understand the effect of multiple stressors on ecosystem functioning, including the consideration of climate change. And we are also mapping dozens of marine protected areas, which are our biodiversity sentinels, including also the consideration of the consequences, the socioeconomic consequences of protection. Taking together all these new information will be of critical importance to implement new marine protected areas to reach the challenging target. But we have to take care, since quantitative targets are not enough. If you really want the effective conservation of our country, we have to remove human stressors. We have to go for long-term monitoring, effective management, effective enforcement, and the systematic involvement of critical stakeholders. And these actions are at the core of the activities of the National Biodiversity Future Center, that with other relevant institutions in this field are trying to make these challenging targets achievable.
Sometimes the monitoring of species under attention for conservation may be performed engaging the citizens, as in the case of the Citizen Science Project. The 10th clip, please.
Ciao, sono Alessandro Campanaro, un ricercatore del CREA, Centro di Ricerca, Difesa e Certificazione di Firenze. Sono qui a presentare un progetto svolto nell'ambito del progetto PNRR National Biodiversity Future. Io vi racconto qualcosa del cervo volante, che è un coleottero che abita le nostre foreste, le foreste italiane ed europee. In particolare vive in foreste di pianura e di bassa quota, quindi anche vicino al mare, foreste prevalentemente di quercia, ed è un coleottero saproxilico. Che significa saproxilico? Che si nutre di legno morto, e il legno morto è presente in quegli ambienti, in quelle foreste che non sono coltivate a scopo umano, per l'utilizzo del legno da parte dell'uomo, e quindi in ambiente naturale. Per questo motivo è una specie che ci indica buone condizioni ambientali ed è protetto dalla direttiva Habitat. Il cervo volante ha un grande dimorfismo sessuale, questo è il maschio e questa è la femmina, e dei comportamenti ecologici ed etologici che sono interessanti da studiare, ed è per questo motivo, come vi ha spiegato Silvia, che abbiamo sviluppato una applicazione e chiediamo il coinvolgimento dei cittadini per il suo studio.
diciamo, un test per far vedere, mostrare il funzionamento dell'applicazione. Allora, facciamo una simulazione con questa immagine, quindi si apre l'app e si carica come prima cosa la foto, che va fatta a debita distanza per non interferire ovviamente nella realtà con l'animale. Una volta caricata la foto, l'app chiede conferma della specie, un cervo volante, Lucanus cervus, quanti individui? 1, maschio o femmina. In questo caso abbiamo davanti a noi una femmina che si riconosce dalle mandibole che sono meno sviluppate rispetto a quelle dei maschi, principalmente, poi altre caratteristiche un po' più, diciamo, di dettaglio. Cosa sta facendo? Potrebbe in questo momento riposare o camminare. Io metto riposo perché lo vedo fermo in quanto un'immagine. E dove lo sta facendo? Su un albero o su, insomma, vari substrati. Per comodità metto un ramo, mi chiede addirittura l'altezza del ramo, ma su questa cosa posso, diciamo, andare velocemente perché è un'immagine. Posso vedere o meno le ali, quindi chiede tutta una serie di altre caratteristiche del contesto per darci altri spunti, e al termine della registrazione mi chiede per quanto tempo ho osservato l'animale prima di compilare la scheda, meno di 1 minuto in questo caso. Salvo e il record viene rapidamente caricato dall'applicazione. Entra subito nel sistema e io in tempo reale posso vedere in Italia tutte le registrazioni che sono state fatte fino adesso. Sono pochine perché il vero, diciamo, anno di raccolta dati è questo qui del 2025. Dall'app posso vedere poi il mio profilo e tutti i dati che ho registrato. Vengono assegnati dei punti e ho un riassunto delle mie segnalazioni.
Citizen science projects have the dual goal of improving our monitoring capacity, but at the same time increasing public awareness on the importance of biodiversity. We have come to the end of the section dedicated to monitoring, and I hope I was able to stress the fact that we have an important treasure to preserve, Italian biodiversity, something that we inherited from our ancestors simply because we have the luck of living in such a beautiful country. But in order to preserve this treasure, first of all, we need to know it at the best of our possibility. Thank you very much. Now the floor is to Professor Lara Maestrelli from the University of Modena, Reggio Emilia, who will begin the section dedicated to conservation.
Good morning, everyone. So now we talk about conservation. The goal of conservation is the main goal is to preserve, maintain the biological diversity of all the different species at all the different levels, from the genes to the species, to the population, up to the ecosystem, in response to all the different stressors, which are the stressors related abiotic stressors, biotic stressors, as well as anthropogenic stressors. So we need to conserve the biodiversity at all the different habitats, which are the national parks, but are also urban environments. But in order to do this, we have some threats as well as some challenges, and among the main threats there are the alien species that can become invasive and then can seriously threaten the biodiversity. Now, urban environments are really hotspot, unfortunately, for the arrival and also really the incubation of alien species that can eventually become also invasive. So now we have Emiliano Mori from CNR, Florence, and he will talk about the problem of alien species, especially in urban environments. First clip, thanks.
Good morning, my name is Emiliano Mori. I am a researcher at the Italian National Research Council, which is part of the National Biodiversity Future Center. My main research topic is the monitoring of alien species, particularly in urban areas. Alien species are all those species defined as being present in a certain area because of the intentional or unintentional intervention by humans. And they are particularly present in urban areas because of fragmented habitats, because of reduced predation risk, and reduced competition. In particular, cities act as both gateways and incubators of alien species. For instance, the ring-necked parakeet is a parakeet which original range includes Central Africa and India, which is now invading most of the Italian cities, as well as the palm borer moth, which is a moth, Paisandisia archon, which threatens native palms. It's native to South America and now it's present throughout European cities, as well as land flatworms, raccoons, scoipus. These are not isolated cases, and the introduction of these species in urban areas may disrupt ecological balances, threaten native biodiversity, and even pose risk to human activities and health. Monitoring, thus, is not only a tool, but also a necessity, and early detection is particularly critical for effective control measures and mitigation strategies. Now we are working on all the species I have already mentioned, also thanks to the advanced technology, including camera traps, but also citizen science platforms and environmental DNA on soils, which enable a more comprehensive and real-time tracking of all species distribution and their behavioral patterns. Beyond this tool, alien species management should be embedded into broader sustainability frameworks with interdisciplinary collaboration between ecologists, data scientists, public health experts, and also urban planners. Thus, to conclude, alien species are not only a side effect of globalization, but they are also a sort of reflection of how human-modified landscapes may shape ecological processes. Thus, monitoring them should be a key aspect of future research, both in terms of biodiversity and human wellness.
Now, Emiliano highlighted the importance of monitoring and especially of early detection. Early detection is crucial also not only to preserve natural biodiversity, but also in order to preserve our crop health, the health of our plants, so that also even our food. And in fact, we have many examples of invasive species that unfortunately arrived and then after a while became invasive and then seriously posed a serious threat to our main crops in Italy, causing millions of euros of damage to, for example, fruticulture and not only. But Emiliano also highlighted the importance of different tools that can be used to monitor the different species, and this is also a way to really understand better which are the different species. And among the different tools that we can use, there are tools that are related to molecular genetic tools. And so now we have Valentina Verducci from the University of Palermo, And she will talk about the use of these specific reliable and rapid identification tools related to genetic. Thanks to Valentina.
I am Valentina Verducci, PhD candidate of the Italian PhD program in biodiversity. I work at the University of Palermo in collaboration with the one of Milano Bicocca. My research project aims to develop the use of DNA-based tools such as DNA barcoding to rapidly identify biodiversity. More in detail, my work focuses on three ambitious objectives: advancement of basic knowledge, development of new technologies, and the transfer to the operational environment for practical applications. In my work, I study biodiversity in an integrated way to provide innovative tools for monitoring and, most importantly, for addressing biodiversity conservation. By analyzing genetic diversity within and between species, the goal is to create reliable and rapid identification methods, an essential need when dealing with vulnerable ecosystems, such as pollinator networks encompassing plants and insects, or troll fisheries, where little is known about animal communities. A crucial aspect of my research also involves the development of reference databases that will serve as a lasting resource for future studies and conservation efforts. By leveraging new technologies, such as portable genetic analyzers, we can improve our capacity to monitor ecosystems. Advancing our knowledge in these areas will provide conservation stakeholders with effective tools to assess whether their actions are truly making a difference in biodiversity preservation. To me, conserving biodiversity means ensuring every species counts, because no matter how small, they sustain the delicate web of life.
So, she talked about the importance of specific tools, but now let's move on to some specific groups of species. For example, we will move to terrestrial biodiversity and fungi. We will hear from Claudia Perini from the University of Siena about fungal biodiversity as an example.
Hi, I'm Claudia Perini, mycologist at the University of Siena at the Department of Life Science. The project that I'm talking about here and presenting you inside the National Biodiversity Future Center deals with a vanishing landscape and its fungal diversity. That is a point of view that was never studied before and very important for the conservation issues of particular habitats. Fungi are extremely numerous in species and constitute a mega-diverse kingdom. Just to have an idea what's about fungal diversity, here I show you a spectacular collection of life-size terracotta models of fruiting bodies. You see many different shapes, different colors. This collection of Francesco Valenti Serini of the 19th century is exposed at the Academy of Fisiocritici in Siena, Central Italy, Europe. Where is this vanishing habitat that I'm studying, that we have studied? It's near Siena. It's called Sienese Biancana Badlands, a fascinating cultural landscape with peculiar geomorphological formations. The vegetation diversifies strongly. We find a mosaic of microhabitats, changing during the season, changing with the years. This particular mosaic of microhabitats revealed a surprising, rich biodiversity that has never been studied. Nearly 140 macrofungi have been identified in only 1 year. The very specific habitat requirements of fungi make them suited as indicators for selecting conservation areas. In fact, the genus Clavaria, Hygrochibe, Entoloma, Geoglossum are considered environmental quality bioindicators. Moreover, at least and not last, we have more time observed a mushroom that is assessed by the IUCN Red List as vulnerable. To me, conserving biodiversity in all its aspects and with all its actors is the only way to save our future. And conserve biodiversity is important because every species counts.
So Claudia told us fungi as bioindicators of environmental quality, and also she highlighted the importance of historical collections for conservation. And now we will hear about a different example. So we move from fungi to insects, and we move from central Italy, Siena, to the Alps, in national parks of the Alps. And we will hear now about a very important group of insects. We will hear about hoverflies, Syrphidae. They are crucially important in the ecosystems because they provide different ecosystem services, mainly pollination as well as biological control. So preserving these species really means a lot to us. Now we hear from Daniele Sommaggio, University of Modena, Reggio Emilia.
My name is Daniele Sommaggio, and I am a researcher in the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia. The focus of my research is the biodiversity of Syrphidae, commonly known also as hoverflies. This fascinating group of Diptera include more than 6,000 species worldwide. The interest in this group surged in recent years since hoverflies play a key role in important ecological services such as, for example, pollination and biological control. With more than 530 species recorded, Italy boasts the second largest Syrphidae fauna in Europe. Yet, our understanding of the country's biodiversity is still limited, and the knowledge of species distribution is fragmented. To bridge these gaps, my research investigates hoverfly biodiversity in several natural areas across Italy, such as, for example, national parks in alpine regions. Additionally, we are examining species preserved in historical collections as comparing new data with old records provides valuable insight into the long-term trends of these insects. I believe preserving biodiversity is essential, not only because every species has intrinsic value, but also because biodiversity is deeply connected with the functioning of ecosystems. For example, growing evidence shows that pollination efficiency is more connected with pollinators' biodiversity than with abundance pollinators. Unfortunately, for many groups of insects, our understanding of biodiversity has limited. Knowing biodiversity is the first step to preserve it. Conserving biodiversity is important because it sustains the functioning of ecosystems that we all depend on.
So the importance of preserving species, and especially the importance also to preserve endangered species. So now we will hear about living fossils. So we will move from the Alps. We will still remain in northern Italy, but we will move from the Alps to freshwater. And we will hear the study case with these fishes, the sturgeons, from Leonardo Congiu, University of Padua.
Hello, my name is Leonardo Congiu and I work at the University of Padua in the Department of Biology. I am involved in the research and conservation of sturgeon species, a group of fish that has existed for over 200 million years. Sturgeons are often called living fossils. In fact, they have changed very little since the time of dinosaurs. They are represented by 26 species distributed across the North Hemisphere, and despite their long evolutionary history, they are now among the most critically endangered animals on the planet, mainly due to overfishing, habitat loss, river damming, and pollution. Our activity focuses on the protection and recovery of native sturgeon species in Italy and in particular in northern Italy. We aim to restore natural populations by improving habitat conditions, removing migration barriers, and supporting the reproduction of genetically diverse individuals. In the field, we monitor wild population through tagging and telemetry, assess river connectivity and water quality, and collaborate with fish farms for captive breeding and restocking programs. Our goal is not only to increase the number of individuals in the wild, but also to ensure that these populations are genetically healthy and self-sustaining over time. Sturgeons are flag species in freshwater ecosystems, and their decline is the evidence of a general decline of the environment. For this reason, by conserving them, we also protect many other organisms that share their habitats. And we also help to restore the natural dynamics of river ecosystems in general. We also engage with local communities, fisheries and policymakers to raise awareness, share scientific data and promote sustainable river management. Conservation is not just about science, it's also about people. These projects contribute directly to the conservation pillar of our broader mission by combining applied research, fieldwork, education, and long-term ecological restoration. To me, to conserve biodiversity is to take responsibility for the natural heritage we have inherited and to ensure that future generations can inherit it as well. Conserved biodiversity is important because every species plays a role in maintaining the balance of ecosystems, and losing even one can cause a chain reaction with consequences far beyond what we can immediately see. Thank you very much.
So preserving one species means preserving many other species. And also he highlighted the importance of people, the importance of involving people at the different levels in order to act in this way. But considering the management of conservation, how to preserve, how to protect the different areas, we need strategies. Strategies need to be planned. And so now we have the video from Alessandro Chiarucci from the University of Bologna, and he will talk about management of protected areas.
I am Alessandro Chiarucci from the University of Bologna, and within the National Biodiversity Future Center, I am coordinating together with Professor Carlo Rondinini of the University La Sapienza of Rome an activity related to the conservation planning and management. In particular, our topic deals with the identification of the areas for the expansion of the protected areas in order to achieve the targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework, the European Biodiversity Strategy, and of the Italian Biodiversity Strategy. So we need to increase the surface covered by protected areas up to 30%, and within our activity we are identifying the places in which it is better to expand the area in order to protect more biodiversity. A second action that we are doing within this activity is the assessment of the effectiveness of protected areas. In particular, we are trying to understand with different approaches, different methods and different taxa how the protected areas have been working in the last decades. We are assessing the effectiveness in terms of the species covered by the protected areas. We are working in terms of dynamical changes within the protected areas, and we are also assessing our parameters like genetic variability and behavioral data of target species. So, to summarize, we are for the first time acting at a national scale for developing a better, more structured and more effective protection system done by a system of protected areas which can ensure the long-term protection of Italian biodiversity within the global and European context.
So Alessandro told us about conservation in terrestrial ecosystems, about strategies to preserve biodiversity in land. But we haven't heard yet about marine ecosystems, so how to improve the conservation of marine ecosystems. And so now we have the pleasure to have an example here with us. And the example will be given by Patrizia Stipcic from the University of Naples Federico II on how to enhance the conservation of marine ecosystems. Patrizia, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Lara, for the introduction. But let me again introduce myself. My name is Patrizia Stipcic. I'm a junior assistant professor at the University of Naples, Federico II. I am a marine biologist, and my focus of the research is the effects of climate change and marine heat waves on different marine ecosystems. In the National Biodiversity Future Center, I'm involved in spoke number 1, which goal is to mapping and monitoring actions to preserve marine ecosystem, biodiversity, and functioning. So the 4 keywords of the spoke number 1 of the National Biodiversity Future Centers are mapping, monitoring, conservation, and restoration. And today we're going to focus on the monitoring action, also because monitoring has recently become one of the key points of several environmental law, starting from the adaptive management that teach us how to work on experiences to provide new information for management, and also monitoring is one of the key phases of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, which is the most important directive we have to conserve and preserve marine ecosystems in Europe. Also, monitoring is one of the key points for reach the Sustainable Development Goals, and also one of the phases that we have to go through to reach the goal imposed by the Nature Restoration Law, which has recently approved in Europe. So the first question that in the National Biodiversity Future Center asked ourselves was, at what point we are with the monitoring the marine ecosystems all along the Italian coast. So we're starting with a scoping review, which is a collection of data from several papers about monitoring. So through some keywords, we were able to collect more than 200 papers that talk about the marine biodiversity and how scientists are monitoring the marine biodiversity. This research included more than 40 researchers and several universities in the National Biodiversity Future Center, and the goal was to understand how the monitoring includes the habitats, the threats, climate change, and what was the rationale of the monitoring, at what spatial and temporal scales are the monitoring conducting, which are the techniques, and also if the marine protected areas are involved in the monitoring of the biodiversity. So from 2000 to 2023, we had an exponential increase of the number of studies that actually talk about the monitoring along the Italian coast of the marine biodiversity. And most of them, actually the 79%, are conducted with an ecological focus. When we try to understand which are the marine habitats that are most monitored, we can see that most of the papers are talking in a general way. So we have most of the paper focusing on monitoring benthic and pelagic ecosystem, but then also we have, going more in details, algae and seagrasses, sponges ecosystem are the most monitoring all along the Italian coast. What is the special and temporal scales about the monitoring of the marine ecosystem? Luckily, we are able to cover all along the Italian coast, which is quite a lot. But unfortunately, most of the papers are not giving detail about the monitoring extent. So in the 51% of the paper that we have collected, it was not specified which is the monitoring extent. And by the way, most of the paper were not monitoring in a very expanded area. So this is something that we need to increase, like the expanded area that we are monitoring. And when we are talking about the temporal scale, we are doing quite well because most of the paper, actually the 66%, are monitoring marine habitat in a long-term data. So long-term, we consider more than 2 years, and this is very important to actually understand how the biodiversity is changing within the time. So only having long-term data can help us to understand how we are doing and how we can better protect marine habitats. Then we were wondering how many monitoring actions are happening in marine protected areas. Most of them are happening outside marine protected areas with 72% of the studies. And then another question was about climate change. So how many monitoring actions are taking in consideration the climate change effects? So even though climate change is a very hot topic nowadays, only the 25% of the paper are considering the monitoring the climate change. Another question was which are the techniques that are most used in monitoring the biodiversity. While 75% of the techniques were not really specified or can change according to the ecosystem that we want to monitor, we had some techniques that are most used, like quadrats, underwater camera, side-scan sonar, multi-beam, and ROV, which is actually good because most of them are non-invasive techniques, so we are not bringing any disturb more while we are monitoring the marine ecosystem. Then we were wondering, inside this other big percentage, what is inside, and we found out that a very low number of studies is using very new technologies like satellite and drone. So after we have collected all this data, we had another question. So how the National Biodiversity Future Center is actually working to enhance the protection of marine habitats. So which are the innovative monitoring strategy that the National Biodiversity is using to conserve the marine biodiversity? Now, when we talk about long-term data and number of studies inside MPAs, so marine protected areas, we were able to show how the use of long-term data can be actually a very good point to understand the efficiency of marine protected areas. So this study involved several universities, so different researchers inside the National Biodiversity Future Center. We have chosen 14 Italian marine protected areas. At the moment, we have the data only from 5 marine protected areas. And why did we choose these 14 Italian marine protected areas? Because already in 2000, there was a big monitoring going on. So we just chose the same sites, the same marine protected areas. We went to do some other pictures, and then we compared the pictures made in 2002, 2003, with the picture made in 2023 and 24. You can see that the methods of making pictures were very different. It really changed in 20 years. So it was also interesting doing that. And by comparing the benthic community and also the nectonic community, we were able to see how the quality of the marine protected areas actually increase. So we have calculated an ecosystem-based quality index, and you can see that between the time 1, so 2002-2003, and time 2, we have an increase of the quality of the benthic community in almost all the area. It was very interesting to see that also in the controls area, so not actually the sites inside the marine protected areas, but right outside the marine protected areas, there was an increase. That's because increasing the biodiversity inside the marine protected areas can actually bring benefits also to the areas close by. Another study that we have conducted inside the marine protected areas to monitor the actions that are carried out there was the one to study the effects of small-scale fisheries on marine coastal habitats. So this study was conducted in Puglia, and the goal was to study the effects of the small-scale fisheries, which normally we believe it doesn't have really big effects on the community. Okay? We always think about very small boats, we always think about traditional fishing techniques, but by studying the monitoring of Posidonia cianica, which is the most important seagrass in the Mediterranean Sea, and the presence of Axinella cannabina, which is a sponge that characterizes the coralligenous habitat, we realized that there is actually a loss of these two species due to the small-scale fisheries, even inside the marine protected areas. So marine protected areas are working, but we really need to take care about all the activities that are allowed to be conducted inside each area. Then we consider the climate change. As I said before, only 25% of the studies that talk about monitoring marine biodiversity include the climate change. So in the National Biodiversity Future Center, we are trying to include more the effects of the climate change in the monitoring programs. One of the effects of climate change that is recently observed is the bleaching of the seagrass Posidonia cianica. So the leaves are actually depigmentated. We're still trying to understand if it's actually a good or bad effects of climate change. And at the moment, a national data collection about the presence and absence of bleached meadows is underway. Talking about the effects of climate change again, we are trying to monitor the effects of the high temperature on the forest of Paramuricea clavata, which is this very big red gorgonia that can create a macrohabitat underneath. So we can have different conditions of currents, we can have different conditions of irradiance, sometimes also temperature. Now, this red gorgonia is threatened by the climate change. So if this red gorgonia will disappear, or if it will die, what will happen to the community that live under it? Also here, collaboration of different universities and different researchers within the National Biodiversity Future Center is trying to understand which are the effects of the mortality of the red gorgonias due to the climate change. Then we also focus on the new technologies that are used for monitoring the marine ecosystem. And between them, we are studying how the satellite data can help us to monitor the biodiversity. So nowadays, we are trying to see the presence of Posidonia cianica, which is quite visible from satellite data. And why should we use satellite data to monitor marine habitat? First of all, it's a non-intrusive technique in nature. Then we can have a systematic data collection. It's a large geographic coverage. And nowadays, we have a very high spatial resolution. But sometimes data from satellite can be combined also with data collected with the drones. At the moment, there is a PhD student conducting a project about how the drone can help us to understand the variability of the marine ecosystems in time. At the moment, we are focusing on macroalgal forest and seagrasses, and you can see how pictures from the drone can be actually analyzed and can provide very important data in a large spatial scale. So just in conclusion, there is a urgent need to improve the knowledge of the spatiotemporal variation of marine biodiversity and of the consequences of global changes on marine ecosystems. And this one can be achieved by developing and testing innovative and cost-effective monitoring systems. So in the National Biodiversity Future Center, we are trying to implement marine monitoring through different actions, for example, defining standardized manuals and protocols for sampling, also developing new indicators, metrics, and indices, and also integrating monitoring surveys with some other data sources, such as remote sensing, multi-beam or taxonomy database, and so on. Thank you very much. I leave the floor now to Professor Maria Chiara Chiantore. She's going to talk about the restoration.
Thank you, Patrizia. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here, for following from home remotely. Well, I'm here to talk about the restoration, because we've heard a lot about monitoring, about conservation, but sometimes conservation is not actually enough. And already my colleagues have pointed out how both the United Nations and the European community are well aware of this and launched several initiatives, several directives, and more recently, the Nature Restoration Law, which entered into force last August, that really stresses how relevant the restoration is in order to increase, to reverse the biodiversity loss and to increase the ecosystem functions and services that biodiversity provides to us. So nature will actually survive, but we need to think about also our life span. I mean, so we need to have interventions which can reverse the biodiversity loss in a reasonably short time scale. That's why restoration comes into place. In the framework of the National Biodiversity Future Center, we have restoration activities which are carried out across the different environments, so from the terrestrial systems to the marine systems. By the way, the restoration law poses some very high standards, high requirements, since we are supposed to restore by 2030 the 30% of the degraded ecosystems, by 2040 the 60% of degraded ecosystems, and by 2050 the 90% of the degraded ecosystems. And if you consider that 90% of ecosystems in Europe are considered somehow degraded, this poses indeed large challenges. And these are challenges that the National Biodiversity Future Centers is trying to take home. So in terms of restoration actions which are carried out in the framework of the project, we have activities, of course, in the urban areas. We have seven urban areas which are underway for being restored through different approaches. We have restoration actions in humid areas and in alluvial plains. And we have also actions which are implemented in post-disturbance events. So after big fires, floods, and storms. And finally, we have the restoration also at sea. We have 7 different ecosystems which are addressed in the 20 different sites. And of course, we have quite differences between the marine and the terrestrial systems, because marine restoration is indeed at the very start. Okay, so we can start with the first video clip.
I'm Giulia Capotorti from the Sapienza University of Rome, and I am an environmental botanist, and I do my research within the National Biodiversity Future Center with respect to the relationships between biodiversity, cities, and urban forestry.
Within this framework, we are investigating the distinctive features among different cities, with respect to their ecological character and natural biodiversity, especially as for climate, biogeography, and human footprint. But also within each city, we aim at defining the different types of local potential natural vegetation. That is, the site-specific natural forests, along with associated dynamic models. Such types represent a very useful reference system, enabling the assessment of conservation status of remnant ecosystems in cities and the discretization of pressures they are affected by. Under a practical perspective, this knowledge is fundamental to set priorities for bringing back nature in our cities. In terms of sites to be restored, for example, alluvial plains usually have more forestation needs than hilly slopes, and also in terms of intensity of intervention, not necessarily active forestation, but also just facilitation of the natural dynamics, as well as to support the choice of the species to be planted. That is, the choice of the right native tree in the right place and for the right purpose.
So the colleague Giulia Capotorti from the University of Roma La Sapienza pointed out how restoring our cities doesn't simply mean to put, let's say, plants and grass, but implies a very deep understanding of the natural landscapes, of the ecoregions where the city is located. So we need to use seeds and plants and grasses which are local and which can actually connect the city to the general environment, natural environment. Okay, so now we can move from terrestrial forests to marine forests and marine meadows with the colleague from the University of Genova, Claudia Pezzilli.
Thank you, Maria Chiara. Hello, everyone. My name is Claudia, and I am a PhD student at the University of Genoa. Over the past year and a half, within the framework of the National Biodiversity Future Center, my research has focused on ecological restoration of macroalgal forests and seagrass meadows.
Just like their terrestrial counterparts, marine forests and meadows are vital to the health of our planet. They support extraordinary biodiversity, produce large amounts of oxygen, protect coastlines, and store carbon dioxide, making them especially valuable in the face of rapid industrialization, climate change, and their increased frequency of extreme weather events.
Today, nearly 40% of the global population lives within 100 kilometers of the coast, and the correlated intense human activities has led to the decline or even disappearance of this fragile ecosystem worldwide. Within the National Biodiversity Future Center, I had the possibility to actively restoring two Mediterranean endemic species, the brown seaweed Ericaria mentacea and the seagrass Posidonia oceanica.
Restoring practices for Ericaria mentacea include several phases. First, we monitor the species morphology and reproductive phenology to assess the maturity of donor populations and detect any changes linked to climate stress. Once mature, apices containing reproductive structures are collected without damaging the donor assemblages. In our laboratory facilities, these apices are placed on round clay tiles to promote zygote release and embryo development. After 2 to 3 weeks, the tiles can be directly outplanting at the restoration site, or the juveniles can be further grown in aquaculture systems to enhance their survival. Our most recent intervention showed promising survival rates, particularly for individuals cultivated for the 3 months in aquaculture facility before being deployed. As for Posidonia oceanica, we tested both ex situ and in situ techniques. For the ex situ approach, we cultivated Posidonia oceanica seeds on specially designed structures featuring a central canal and multiple holes to enhance root anchoring. After 6 months, part of the seedlings were deployed at sea, inserting the structures into Posidonia oceanica dead mat and securing them with iron sticks. In the in situ approach, we transplanted cuttings from donor sites already impacted by storms or anchoring, securing them onto biodegradable mats made from coconut fiber. The cultivation of the remaining seedlings is ongoing, with a second deployment planned for the late April to test different growing periods and strategies for increasing restoration success.
These efforts aim to contribute, plant by plant, to the revival of ecosystems that are not only beautiful but essential for life on Earth. Thank you very much everyone for listening to me, and have a nice day in Osaka. Bye!
Well, seagrass and the seaweeds restoration is probably one of the most efficient ways of restoring the marine ecosystems, also because it's actually more similar to restoring some vegetated terrestrial environments. And it's really very promising. And both the seaweed and the seagrass monitoring of the reproductive condition and of the production of seeds from Posidonia is part of a biodiversity sampling week that we are going to perform in the next few weeks alongside several other activities of monitoring biodiversity in Italy in the framework of the National Biodiversity Future Center. But we can also restore agro systems, so agricultural systems. So the next video, we can start.
Hi everyone, my name is Simone Orsenigo and I'm an associate professor in systematic botany at the University of Pavia. As declared by the United Nations, ecosystem restoration is one of the most urgent challenges of our society, and we need to halt and reverse the degradation of ecosystems, especially in urban and agricultural areas. Personally, I am involved in the activities of the National Biodiversity Future Center and in particular in SPOC 4, and at the moment I'm working on nature-based solution in degraded habitats of the riparian areas of the Po Valley along the Po River. The Po Valley is one of the most anthropized areas in the world, and here agricultural activities occupies practically every surface, including the floodplain areas. In this context, in collaboration with the other partners entities of the National Biodiversity Future Center, local protected areas, and Council for Agricultural Research, we are assessing the impact of reforestation interventions in the floodplain areas. This afforestation had been carried out about 20 years ago in the sites subject to periodic flooding of the river, and here we compared the biodiversity of soils and plant species and the forest structural diversity. Using an integrated approach, we are comparing parameters with areas that are still cultivated, where intensive poplar plantations still exist, natural poplar woodland, and nature-based solution represented by plantations of mixed forest. The semi-natural stands show the highest number of native species and limited invasive species, as well as the more efficient soil nitrogen cycle than natural and cultivated plantations. Moreover, we are evaluating the use of a mix of native herbaceous species in order to limit the invasiveness of alien species in the poplar stands, improve soil quality, and increase the attractiveness for pollinators. For these purposes, we choose a mix of herbaceous species belonging to the genus Vicia, a legume, that ensure an extended flowering during the late spring and a good coverage even during the winter season. We hope that the results of this experiment can convince farmers to improve the quality of the agro-ecosystems, increasing plant diversity, and establishing a winning strategy to reduce the impact of exotic species and mowing intervention in poplar plantations.
So Simone Orsenigo from the University of Pavia pointed out how planting alongside agricultural cultivated species such as poplar with other natural species, both plants and grass, can really enhance ecosystem functions at the soil level and improve at the end the functionality also of the agricultural system. So agricultural and the restoration of natural habitats can walk hand in hand, not only because of pollinators, but also of other functions which are provided by the soil. The same multi-species approach is being also implemented in marine systems. So we can start with another clip from the colleague Francesca Necci from the University of Salento.
Hi everyone, I'm Francesca Necci, a PhD student at the University of Salento, and right now I'm in Porto Cesario, an amazing marine protected area in the Salento Peninsula in Italy. I'm here to tell you more about our restoration project and why it's so important. Human activities like overfishing are causing serious damage to marine environments and threatening biodiversity. In some cases, protecting and conserving is not enough. We actually need to restore them. One of the main issues we are dealing with here is the Dave mussel fishery that took place in the past. While this activity is now illegal, it has led to barren grounds, area where the rich diversity of life that once lived here now has been lost. Before this damage, these areas were full of life, with different kinds of organisms that live here, like algae, sponges, corals, and seagrasses, all coexisting in a beautiful mosaics. To restore this area, we decided to use a multi-species approach that has been not explored so much in marine environments so far, but there is evidence suggesting that when you transplant species that naturally live together, can enhance the success of the restoration. For our experiment, we decided to use two different key habitat formers, coral Cladocora cespitosa and an important plant for Mediterranean Sea, Posidonia oceanica. We choose to use two different kinds of sponges, Plisina ruphoba that is typically found with the coral, and Chondrilla nucula that is often found with the plant. The MPA of Porto Cesario is the perfect location for this restoration project because the rocky habitats are still damaged. In this way, we are testing the idea that different species can help each other, which can enhance the success of the restoration. We are currently analyzing the survival and growth rates of these species in order to understand if this multi-species approach can really help to restore this ecosystem. So this is our restoration project. I'm really excited about it, and hopefully it will contribute to improve the health of marine oceans in the future. Thank you very much for the attention that you give me, and bye-bye.
So the multi-species approach seems to be the only way probably to go in extremely degraded habitats such as the barren grounds that Francesca has shown us. But the same approach is also being implemented at present in another very challenging system that is the intertidal, the rock intertidal, as you will see in the next video from Claudia Lamarca from CNR Palermo.
Hi everyone, I'm Claudia Lamarca, a marine biologist from the Italian National Research Council. I am involved in the SPOC 2 of the National Biodiversity Future Center, and I'm working on a restoration project of marine habitats. Specifically, our habitat of study is called vermetid reef. The vermetid reef is bioconstruction made by vermetid gastropod and crustose coralline algae that populate the central and the southeast rocky coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and I'm here to tell you more about our project and more about these habitats. The vermetid reef has an important ecological role for our sea. In fact, like a real tropical coral reef, this bioconstruction supports a wide biodiversity and provides a lot of ecosystem services for human well-being. It reduces coastal erosion, it's a carbon sink, and it modulates sediment and nutrient cycles, such an example. It is also highly sensitive to human impact and global climate change, and it's protected under the European legislation, and also the more recent nature restoration law calls for the restoration of sites where the vermetid reefs are present. Our restoration study is implemented in Sicily, in the central part of the Mediterranean along the coast of Palermo city. Here we are culturing vermetid colonies directly in the field using artificial substrate produced with a three-dimensional printing technology and made of geopolymer concrete. This is a new kind of cement produced with a lower environmental impact, and it is highly resistant to the field conditions. In our study, we also found the positive effect of the macroalgal canopy at the beginning of the colonization of these artificial substrates by vermetids, supporting the concept that multi-species restoration may be the key to implement and develop successful restoration strategies. Last summer, after 1 year of field colonization, we moved our substrate covered by vermetids at the restoration site, where they still are, aiming to repopulate a degraded vermetid reef with a very low vermetid density and a lot of patches of bay rocks. At the moment, all the vermetid colonies we moved to the restoration site are still alive, and we are waiting for the next summer to know if they are able to colonize the reef where they are now, and if our restoration strategy is working in the right direction. Thank you for your attention, and bye-bye from Italy. Ciao!
Okay, so restoration seems to be a very promising tool, but it has also costs, not only economic costs, but also environmental costs. So we need to assess, to balance the benefits and the costs, the environmental costs due to the restoration interventions. So there are lots of activities in the framework of the National Biodiversity Future Center, and in particular for the marine systems, to evaluate the costs associated to the restoration. Not only, as I said, economic costs, but also the environmental ones through tools such as the life cycle analysis. Life cycle analysis, you know, is a way to compare how environmentally friendly are two different devices which produce the same output. So we can compare lamps, bulb lamps or LED lamps, for instance. And we can do this exactly the same for comparing restoration protocols and tools. So that's what we're doing in the framework of the project. And about the use of LCA analysis, the colleague Benedetto Rugani from CNR IRET will talk about in the next video.
Hi, my name is Benedetto and I'm an industrial ecologist at the National Research Council of Italy. My research interest is on understanding human interactions and the impact of human-driven systems on the environment and human health. Let me assume the role of a land manager and I will show you what nature restoration means in the practice. We will go on the field and we will analyze what the environmental costs and benefits imply. So this cropland was abandoned many years ago. An intervention of afforestation could be done here to restore some ecosystem functionalities, prevent from soil erosion, restore biodiversity, increase the habitat for biodiversity, and maybe also offer some recreational services for people. Before planting trees, however, soil must be prepared, which implies the use of machineries and therefore an impact on the environment. The production of trees in the nursery is also not free of impact, since water, fertilizers, energy and other resources must be consumed. And pollution, again, is generated during the transportation phase from the nursery to the plantation site. Finally, trees can be planted in their new habitat. But this operation is also not free of impacts, since fertilization, irrigation, and the use of shelters or other artificial measures must be undertaken to mitigate the risk of mortality. Recreational services are generated. Tons of carbon have been sequestered, air pollution removed, nutrients and water cycles revamped, pollination activities increased, and all these for free. The impact associated with resource consumption and the release of pollutants over the life cycle of the nature restoration can be plotted and then compared with the beneficial value of the generated ecosystem services. And what we observe is that benefits overcome costs, but not immediately. This happens only after a few years. As we can see, trees and habitat, forest habitat, need much time to grow, and investments in nature-based solutions are rewarding only if long-term sustainability planning are foreseen. Innovative policies and decision-making must follow the rules of nature and no more the way around.
Okay, so we need to consider that it's not us researchers who will restore our seas and the terrestrial environments in order to achieve the goals of the nature restoration law, but it will be enterprises who will need to take over and to do our the implementations of the protocols that we are drawing at a large scale. We need politics to jump in and to perform, to support these activities and to create the appropriate frameworks for doing that. So that's why in the framework of our project we produced very recently a report on restoration that can be downloaded from the website of the NBFC. And we are producing a catalog of nature-based solutions which will be very useful for enterprises and for local stakeholders to understand which are the most suitable approaches to implement in their own cases. So I leave the floor to Chiara Catalano from CNR, who will give you some information about the Cata tool, the NBS.
Good morning, my name is Chiara Catalano, researcher at the National Research Council of Italy. In this video, I will introduce you to the NBS Cata tool, namely a decision support tool for the design and planning of resilient nature-based solutions tailored for the Mediterranean region. The Kata tool is a product of the National Biodiversity Future Center organized in hub and spokes. The one involved are the Spoke 5, focused on urban ecosystems, Spoke 4, focused on terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems, and Spoke 2, focused on marine ecosystems. What are NBS? Natural-based solutions are defined as actions to protect, conserve, restore, sustainably use and manage natural or modified ecosystems, which address societal, economic and environmental challenges in an effective way and adaptive, while simultaneously providing human well-being, ecosystem services, resilience and biodiversity benefit. One of the main features of the Kata tool is to guide users towards the selection of the most suitable NBS, addressing priority societal challenges. In the first step, the user shall select the main objective of the action, namely to protect, to restore and or manage, to create new or novel ecosystems. In the second step, the user shall select the domain of intervention in the urban, terrestrial or marine. In the third step, which corresponds to the basic operativity of the tool, user can filter NBS according to the implementation area of one of the three domains. In the fourth step, which corresponds to the advanced operativity of the tool, users can select solutions according to the performance towards target societal challenges. Regarding the NBS taxonomy adopted, the Kata tool encompasses 52 urban NBS, mostly of type 3, 47 terrestrial NBS of type 3 and 2, 40 marine NBS, mostly of type 2. Regarding the implementation area, the one related to urban domain are driven by function scale, such as roofs, walls and roads. The one related to terrestrial domain are hazard and disturbance driven, such as erosion and flooding prone areas. The one related to the marine domain are ecosystem driven, such as barren grounds and mangrove forests. The societal challenges adopted are the 12 identified by the European Roadmap published by Network Nature, while the 3 indicators per challenge are adapted from the summary for policymakers of the handbook published by the European Commission. But how is the data made available and ready to use? What is the level of interaction between users and the Kata tool? To the first question, both theoretical solutions and case study entries are processed and then visualized on a user-friendly dashboard. To the second, besides navigating the contents, user can download data related to NBS and add their case study or theoretical solution after registration. The web-based dashboard can be navigated in 2 ways: the free navigation, where users can go through the contents without constraints, and the wizard navigation, where users, to get the result, must follow the steps from 1 to 4. The results are displayed in 2 ways: in a tabular form with a list of NBS ranked per societal challenges, and in form of a card, with a photo and a short description among other information. The score is determined by making use of 3 indicators per challenge visible on the dashboard by passing the mouse onto the NBS name. By clicking on the link icon, the user will get a fact sheet to download and containing detailed information such as an extended description, a reference section and a link to case studies. So, are you curious to see the first release of the Kata tool? Then stay tuned on the NBFC website. If you want to know what is happening on the ground, follow the NBS Italy Hub and join Network Nature. Thank you.
So this NBS Catatool is really a huge activity that has been performed, that is still in progress in the framework of our NBFC. And it's really a very good example of intermingling between the different ecosystem scientists. It's been very hard, actually, also to combine different languages, because sometimes terrestrial ecologists and marine ecologists use different terminologies for the different solutions. So it was a really big challenge, and it will be available on the website and on the gateway that will remain from the end of the project. I want to finish this block on the restoration activities in progress with the most challenging, probably one, that is the deep sea, that is actually the most also unknown of the environments of the Italian area. So I leave the floor to Emanuela Fanelli from University Polytechnic of Marche.
The deep sea is the largest biome on Earth, covering 90% of the ocean's volume. It's also the least known, with less than 0.1% of the surface explored. At the same time, the deep sea hosts unique and rich ecosystems, such as incredible coral reefs made up by the so-called cold water corals, but also sponge grounds or seepage fields. Although remote, these ecosystems are not safe by human impacts, especially by fishing activities, but also marine litter, extraction of abiotic resources for energy production, and others. As the species inhabiting the deep sea are long-lived species with slow growth rate, the impacts can be more dramatic and the recovery very difficult. In this context, the activity on the restoration of deep sea habitats carried out within the framework of the National Biodiversity Future Center spoke to Activity 2, and in synergies with two European projects named the Life Dream, coordinated by Dr. Fellini from CNR ISMAR, and the Horizon Europe Redress, coordinated by Professor De Novaro from Polytechnic University of Marche, has the main objective of restoring the deep reefs of the Dome Canyon, located within the Gulf of Naples in the southern Tyrrhenian Sea. Here, we deployed between May and July 2024 different artificial reef structures that are made of pozzolanic material and can be of different heights, like this one, 5th floor or 4th floor, and they offer more surface for the settlement of new corals. These structures are characterized also by a three-dimensional shape with different crevices that can offer shelter for deep sea species such as fish, crustaceans, or other vertebrates that are associated commonly to these deep coral reefs. Within the Dome Canyon, we deployed different structures at three different depths: at the head of the canyon, in the middle of the canyon, and at the highest depths at 1,000 meters of depth. And we expect that the coral larvae coming from the adjacent coral reefs colonize this structure. We will expect to see the results of this deployment during next summer, when we will do another campaign on board of the Gaia Blue, the oceanographic vessel of the National Research Council in the Dome Canyon. Here is Emanuela Fanelli from Polytechnic University of Marche.
So a lot of work going on, a lot of protocols being implemented, lots of tools being developed, but we need to have a strong interaction with the appropriate ministries for making the nature restoration plans translate appropriately the nature restoration law requirements. So this is really the next big step for our effectiveness. Okay, so now I finished the restoration section, and I leave the floor to Fabio De Pascale from University of Padova for the valorization of biodiversity.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria Chiara. I'm Fabio Pascali. I'm from the biology department of the University of Padua, and I will talk about the valorization of biodiversity that we are carrying on at the National Biodiversity Future Center. So, which is the value of biodiversity? I guess we convinced you, my colleagues convinced you by now that biodiversity has a value, an intrinsic value by itself, but I think we also agree that our society, our economy is barely taking into account this value in systems. So, but we think that there are many ways to put the value of biodiversity within our society, our economy, and our system. So, our program that we put on to valorize biodiversity among the society is taking into account education, technology transfer, and innovation among the things that we are carrying on. So let's start with one example from Carmen Ferravega, which will. No, sorry, so from Sara Bononomi.
Working at the National Research Council of Italy, belonging to the network of the National Biodiversity Future Center. I'm involved in the SPOC 2 dedicated to marine biodiversity, specifically within the task related to managing geographical expansion of aquatic invasive species in the Mediterranean. So the Mediterranean currently stands as one of the most invaded seas in the world. Aquatic invasive species can have negative ecological and economic consequences on native communities and on their associated ecosystem services, mainly due to their opportunistic behavior. For instance, the ongoing expansion of the Atlantic blue crab, Calinectes sapidus, is posing significant challenges to local ecosystem and artisanal small-scale fishing community in the Mediterranean, especially in the northern Adriatic Sea. So how we should remove such invader? Considering that the blue crab is an edible species, can we try to get some benefits on its removal, not only for the environment, but also for local communities who have been damaged by the blue crab? And in this view, the goal of my project is to evaluate how it's possible to add a value to an aquatic invasive species, such as the blue crab, by promoting responsible fishing practices associated with certification initiatives. And here you can see the conceptual framework of an adaptive management strategy we outlined to mitigate the expansion of blue crab in invaded coastal habitats in the northern Adriatic Sea. And so such strategy consists of 4 boxes with specific activities and actors involved. All boxes are basically all connected together. And so starting from the left, the data should be collected about a certain fishery through consolidated participatory approaches, including local ecological knowledge, to have robust data required to think about and implement a management practice. For instance, the development of a new fishery, which will benefit local community and their economy, including harvesting control rules. Then promote and ensure that responsible fishing occur through less impacting gears. In this case, specific traps could be used to catch the blue crab. And this should be associated with certification initiatives that can create opportunities and challenges, such as development of new markets with government support programs and industry-focused activities. And in this context, valorized biodiversity, in my case, has an edible aquatic invasive species such as the blue crab, is important because it helps to maintain ecosystem balance, support sustainable fisheries, and enhances the resilience of marine habitats. This is particularly relevant for managing aquatic invasive species, as responsible harvesting can mitigate their ecological impact while creating economic opportunity. Well, that's all from my side. I thank the NBFC for this opportunity, and I hope the audience joined my presentation. And I salute to everyone in Osaka. Thank you.
So as Sara told us, we can actually build a value from an invasive species that is a problem for the biodiversity, but we can find this solution of building values from restoring an environment that was damaged by an invasive species. So the second clip that is about technology transfer will be from Carmen Ferravega, that will talk about how with fishery we can build the value from some tools that they are developing in the, for the research that will be useful also for the fisher associations.
Hello, Osaka. I'm Carmen Ferrar, researcher at the National Research Council of Italy, part of the National Biodiversity Future Center. I'm involved in Spoke 2, which focuses on the protection of biodiversity in the Mediterranean Sea. Since fishing is one of the major anthropogenic threats to biodiversity, as it impacts not only organisms, but also the ecosystem, the need to manage fisheries from an ecosystemic point of view has been raised in the last decades. So to this, we need to have a good knowledge about the distribution of fishing activities, knowing where these activities occur, when and how. And this is where technology kicks in. We have used artificial intelligence, mainly machine learning techniques, to analyze tracking data from fishing vessels. In particular, we have used the automatic identification system data, as it is mandatory for fishing vessels over 15 meters in the European Union. And since more than 80% of the total Mediterranean fleet is composed of small-scale fishing vessels that do not have these systems on board, we have implemented the installation of low-cost tracking devices in some pilot vessels. The analysis of this data allowed us to produce detailed maps of the spatiotemporal distribution of fishing activities, which provides essential information to manage fisheries more sustainable, promote eco-friendly practices, and provide insights for marine spatial planning. Besides, our results could become a commercial solution to give more new opportunities to the industry sector. To me, valuing biodiversity means to find solutions that sustain a balance between nature and human activities, because it's not just about protecting the environment, but doing so in a way that future generations could continue to benefit from a sea full of life. These activities are a step forward for a more sustainable and thoughtful use of marine resources, because protecting biodiversity is not just the right thing to do, it's the only way to guarantee a good future for all of us. Thanks for your attention, Osaka, and hope that you will enjoy this expo.
So we have seen that there are some opportunities for companies, small companies or small fisher associations, to build value from a biodiversity problem. But what we would like to understand is if these companies are ready to build some business models based on biodiversity. So what Sara Tessitore and her colleagues from the Sant'Anna school in Pisa have done is that they interviewed some companies to see how they can introduce biodiversity in their business models. So here's her talk.
Hi Osaka, I'm Sara Tessitore, Assistant Professor at Management Institute of Sant'Anna School in Pisa. During our research, Sant'Anna, together with Padova University, drafted a white book about the experiences of some companies that engaged in biodiversity improvement. Our research investigates in depth the relationship between business and biodiversity. Many companies, not fully aware, depend on biodiversity and from ecosystem services that nature generates. But pollution, climate change, and the overuse of natural resources represent the main threats to biodiversity and generate high risk to business activities. From our research, we selected 20 Italian companies as best practice in biodiversity management. The sample includes small, medium and large enterprises operating in a lot of productive fields such as agri-food, power generation, paper and packaging production, and so on. All these companies adopted measures to restore, conserve, and regenerate nature in Italy or in other international countries. The goal of these companies is to limit their impact on biodiversity, but they mainly want to preserve the natural resources from which they source. For these companies, investing in biodiversity represents an opportunity to generate shared value, mainly with local communities, by providing them better natural environments, job opportunity, economic growth, and development. Different business strategies emerge from our research. For instance, some companies such as Lavazza and Ferrero tested solutions to regenerate soil biodiversity to produce high quality of nuts and coffee. Other companies such as D.S. Smith strongly cooperate with local communities closer to its productive sites, so they can restore natural habits and protect some species. For me, value in biodiversity is generate value for the whole society. Finally, value in biodiversity is important to strongly contribute in sustainable development and reduce inequalities. Bye-bye, Osaka, and thank you.
So as Sara showed us, there are some companies that are already doing something in biodiversity. But at NBFC, we would like to foster the role that small and medium companies can do in promoting and valorizing biodiversity, but also not at the small and medium company level, but also at the startup level. We want to promote ideas and business in biodiversity. So that's why we are putting on many programs to build up new startups and entrepreneurs in Italy, starting from ideas that are in the research that we are carrying on at the National Biodiversity Future Center. So the next point is health. We all know that our health is important for us. We all agree on that. But we sometimes forget that our health depends on the health of the other living organisms that are on the planet. So we call this, not at the NBFC, but the scientific community call this change of paradigm One Health, because only taking care of the health of the planet, we can also take care of the health of humans. So about this topic, we are carrying on many different research, and the one that I brought you here is the one that Rachele De Giuseppe is doing at the University of Pavia.
Hello everyone from Osaka, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Rachele De Giuseppe, and I work at the Lab of Dietetics and Clinical Nutrition within the Department of Public Health, Experimental and Forensic Medicine at the University of Pavia. I'm delighted to share with you some exciting insights into the importance of nature-based solutions in the field of nutrition, food, urban health. As cities continue to grow and evolve, we are faced with increasing challenges related to the urban environment. Pollution, stress, changes in lifestyle contribute to a rising risk of developing non-communicable diseases such as type 2 diabetes, respiratory diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, as well as heart diseases, and also certain types of cancer that are heavily influenced by our daily environment. And to combat these challenges, we are looking at innovative ways to support health and well-being in our urban landscapes, and nature-based solutions are emerging as a powerful tool. Within the National Biodiversity Future Center, my work focusing on valorizing the biodiversity that exists right in our cities. So biodiversity is not only about preserving nature, but it's also a crucial ingredient for human health. And biodiverse environments provide clean air, fresh water, and even bioactive compounds that have the potential to revolutionize how we approach food, medicine, and overall health. And to achieve this, my work is divided into two main approaches. First, at a macroscopic level, I analyze and apply a personalized model of the functional exposome. And this model allows me to examine the integrated effects of various environmental exposure factors, including nutrition and lifestyle, on critical processes such as inflammation, oxidative stress. And by understanding how these factors interact, we can gain a clearer picture of how urban living affects our health. And we are able to identify key intervention points to improve it. Second, and more specifically, I focus on identifying solutions through nature-based solutions. And these solutions are designed to support, to preserve the biodiversity of ecosystem within the urban setting. One exciting area of research is the discovery of bioactive molecules found in nature. And these compounds are not only promising candidates for developing new drugs and nutraceuticals, but they also have the potential to enhance our food systems. And by integrating these bioactive molecules into our diets, we can develop foods that are both highly effective in promoting health and also sustainable for our environment. I believe that embracing nature-based solutions, we can create a future where urban living and nature not only coexist, but also thrive together. As we move forward, it's essential to recognize that our health is deeply connected to the health of our environment. So thank you very much for your attention today. I hope the discussion inspires you to explore how integrating nature into urban living can lead to healthier, more sustainable communities. And sending warm greetings to everyone in Osaka. Together, we can build a healthy future through nature.
Well, but how we can do this? Well, we saw that there are some opportunities at the research level, at the technology transfer level, at the companies level. There are many opportunities by which we can put biodiversity straight in our society and building a future where we can live together with other organisms and still have our benefits that we all are living in right now. But we don't, in this moment, we are not taking into account the price that we pay using nature and biodiversity resources, not now and not even in the future. So we think that for this to be changed, we need to change our mind and our way of life. And to do this, there are many ways. And we think that one of these is starting from our heritage and looking at our natural collection and spreading the knowledge about what there was here in what there was in Italy, about species that were present and that are not more present in Italy because they were extinct. And by spreading this knowledge, we can build the idea that caring about biodiversity is important for us and for the species that live with us in the planet. So because of this, we are doing a lot of work in digitalizing the natural collection across Italy. And this is what Elena Canadelli will talk about in her talk here.
Natural history collections are relevant to the study of biodiversity, nature preservation, ecology, taxonomy, genetics, but also to the study of the human past. The National Biodiversity Future Center is digitizing a large amount of collection preserved in Italian museums, such as herbaria and collection of insects and other animals. In Florence, in the Herbario Centrale Italiano, thanks to the collaboration of the University of Padova and University of Florence, is going on a massive digitization of the largest herbaria in Italy, such as Florence, Padova, Rome, Turin, among the others. This action is very important in order to enhance the knowledge of our collection and know more about scientific research and also the information that these collections bring with them, such as the date, the specimen, the place where has been gathered, the name of collectors. And in the meantime, other collection, smaller collection, has been digitizing all around Italy. And a survey of the collection scattered around the country is going on. So digitization is a tool, a very effective tool, in order to enhance, to know better, and to better preserve these collections. And at the end of the project, all this information, images, and also the metadata connected to these images will available online for all the people interested, scientists, but also all people in the world.
So this effort in digitalizing the natural collection is important because we will see what was present in Italy in the past, but also we can show the people what is the beauty of the species that were present and are present in Italy, and also we can build an amount of data that can be analyzed by the scientists. But collection and museums are important because people go to exhibition, but we think that the one of the most promising field in which we can spread the knowledge about biodiversity is education. And that's why we are putting on some very important and vast program of activities for primary and secondary schools in Italy. And the next talk about it will be about this and will be from Letizia and
We are
Greta.
Letizia Luini and Greta Persico, both researchers at the University of Milano Bicocca, Department of Human Science for Education Riccardo Massa, and part of BIT, Biodiversity Education and Awareness Team, an interdisciplinary research group working on ecological and biodiversity education. We implement on a continuous basis and through a place-based approach a methodology that is centered on exploration as a pedagogical approach in an outdoor context. The proposal emphasizes experiential learning, valuing children's spontaneous questions and hypotheses. We created a set of origami that, when combined, give rise to different explorative proposals that promote new posture and interaction with places and all the beings in it. Then the explorers are asked to document their discoveries in naturalistic notebooks using multimodal tools such as notes and sketches. The documentation process keeps track of the learning process, sharing it with peers. Every week, we implement this method with fourth-year primary school classes integrated by teachers into their school curriculum. At the same time, we are conducting a national experimentation involving more than 50 educators and teachers from early childhood educational care services, primary and secondary schools. That means that more than 600 children and young people of different ages are taking part in this research. according to scientific literature, experiential and participatory approaches, which encourage the development of a meaningful relationship with places, appear to have an effect on more biodiversity-aware behavior.
Our research group aimed at developing a methodological approach that promotes the protection and enhancement of biodiversity through the engagement of people in order to build a meaningful relationship with places, especially those of everyday life. The results we want to achieve are threefold. One, to develop effective methodological approaches and pedagogical tools in biodiversity education. Effective because they are experiential, questioning based on naturalistic observation. Two, to disseminate them to a wide audience, such as environmental and ecological educators and teaching staff, as well as children, young people, and adults. And three, to contribute to the transformation of the relationships between people and their environment, promoting a caring attitude and awareness of the biodiversity's value. To us, valorizing biodiversity is to create opportunities where everyone can experience the nearby biodiversity. Valorizing biodiversity is important because it can enable us to grasp the complex system of reciprocal relationships that connect human and non-human world to each other. Bye-bye, Osaka!
And now we move to the last part of my presentation, that is about science communication. Because we know that education can do a lot for the future generation, but we also need to act now. And to do this, we can spread the knowledge faster by using science communication as a dissemination tool among the society, among different publics in Italy that are interested, that are not usually interested in science, but they came into science by looking at comics, by going to festivals, and or by watching the TV. So we want to put in all these media some project that talks about biodiversity with using science communication project. So about this, I asked my colleague Chiara to give a talk to us to talk about some of the projects that we care the most.
Hi everybody, my name is Chiara Anzolini and I work for Spoke 7, the Spoke dedicated to science communication and public engagement. My colleagues and I try to develop and spread science communication projects in order to convey the importance of biodiversity to different audiences, from kids to adults, and especially to those people that don't know they might be interested in science. One of the projects we are more proud of is the Biodiversity Issue, a comic book which is part of the Comics and Science series. In this series of books, the authors are brought to universities and science centers where they can get their inspiration directly from the interaction with scientists. The most important part of this Comics and Science series is that the comic story does not explain science. The aim is to make the reader entertained and excited. Another project we developed is a discussion game about the interaction between human species and wildlife. In a discussion game, participants are asked to discuss and share their ideas in order to reach a common policy about the best way for humans to interact with nature. The last project I want to talk to you about is SBI, Species Biodiversity Investigation. This is a series of scrolly games, a type of game you can play by scrolling down your mobile phone or your laptop. Our game is focused on endangered species and is targeted to students between 11 and 14 years old. While you play, you are asked to read and solve different quizzes and games to solve a criminal case about the endangered species. To me, valorize biodiversity means make people excited and entertained. And this is why today we are here at the Play Festival del Gioco in Bologna, which is one of the places we bring our science communication projects, because these are the people we want to be interested in science.
Okay. And I want to finish with this slide that is the cover of these comics that we have done, the biodiversity issue, because we are in Osaka and we are in Japan, so it's the homeland of manga, and so I want to give this view of our issue in the English edition of these comics, but it also helps me to put the attention on the things that all these project, all the materials that we are doing on the science communication level, on the education level, on the research level, because also the digitization of the natural collection that Elena spoke about, but also all the data that our colleagues in the previous talks show will be available through the Biodiversity Gateway. That will be the real heritage that the National Biodiversity Future Centers will give to Italy, because will be an immense portal by which citizen, researcher and policymaker can access to all the things that the National Center has done, because there they will find all the data collection that will be produced, and all the educational materials, so schools can access them for free and use them in their education programs. So I will now close my talk, and thank you all of you for the attention, also from online, and see you in Italy at the National Biodiversity Future Center. Thank you. Well, we can now, since we have some minutes left, take some questions by me or by my colleagues that came before me. Oh, yes, please. Thank you. So, if so, thanks again for the attention, and pass by in Italy to see what we are doing on biodiversity. Bye.
Thanks a lot to the people in the technical control room. You've done a great job. Thanks a lot for your